No doubt that you are familiar with the saying, money is the root of all evil. And then, no doubt, you have either said, as I have, or heard it said, as I have as well, no, 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 no. Money's not the root of all evil. It's the love of money that's the root of all evil. And I think that they're both true because two things can be true at the same time. Certainly, love of money is a bad thing. But when you really start to think about it and put everything into context and look at human history, money might just be the root of all evil. That just might be it because it sure does when you trace a lot of the bad things that happen, a lot of the abuses, a lot of the fraud, a lot of manipulation, a lot of wars, and just bad things that human beings perpetrate on other human beings. Close by all of that, in close proximity is money. And you almost have to laugh at it because it's so preposterous when you think about this stuff for just an extra second and you think things a little more through. Like not quite all the way through, but just a little bit more than you normally do. Like, wait a minute. What's going on now? Who did what? Huh? How much? It went where? What who wh Yeah. Yeah. So history, here's another one for you. History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. Got it. Yeah, well, it's all pretty close. So, do you remember the savings and loan crisis? Well, this happened in the 80s, so I don't. I was born in 78, so I was a kid, but savings and loan institutions were small banks that specialized in home loans and savings accounts. And a lot of them collapsed in the 1980s. There was a big, you know, event in the 80s because they were making bad loans. There was fraud and there was a lot of deregulation that led to, of course, a massive government bailout. Now, that's a term right there that I'm just realizing is a term because it's not a government bailout. It's a taxpayer bailout. A government bailout. That's so funny. That's recurring language as well, which is used to, or at least has the effect of softening the impact of you and I hearing that. It's a government bailout. No, it's you and I funding the bailout because it's our tax dollars that the government is choosing to distribute. Talk a lot about our most valuable resources being time, attention, energy, and money, and they're valuable because they're scarce. Well, they're not scarce to the government. They're abundant. And I think that that's just a perfect combination of two words, government bailout, because they certainly do act like it's their money. The government does not act like the money that they're allocating is our money, but that's what it is. So how did the savings and loan crisis collapse happen? Well, the beginning of the problem was through deregulation in the early 80s. Before the deregulation, these S&Ls, savings and loans, were low risk. They were focused on home mortgage and they were highly regulated. After deregulation, they were allowed to take on more risk, invest in commercial real estate, and offer higher interest rates to get more money in the door. If you want to attract depositors, you need to offer them an incentive to change whatever their behavior was before. If their behavior was before, I'm in a savings account over at XYZ Bank, and the savings and loan says, well, we'll give you an interest rate on your money that is higher than those, well, more money is going to come in. So the problem was that many of these savings and loan organizations didn't understand risk, or they understood the risk and they chose to take on too much of it. And it just led to bad investments. So they started to give, stop me if you've heard this one, they started to give loans to high risk borrowers who were speculating or speculators who were speculating. And why? Well, because they were making more money. Why? Because when a bank issues a loan, there's profit that's generated, which is why they do it. Believe it or not. It's a pretty honest business in that how it theoretically works. So, real estate bubble happens, prices rise, hiding the risk, similar to, wait for it, the 2008 housing bubble. But then, of course, some of these organizations used fake loans or insider deals to make personal profits. Like giving loans to their friends or funding their own businesses. Of course, that was happening. Of course. Then in the late 1980s, rising interest rates went up, real estate collapsed, and the Federal Reserve decided to start fighting some inflation by rising interest rates. And these S&Ls couldn't afford to pay high interest rates on the deposits while holding low interest, long-term home loans. Real estate bubble pops. Many loans go bad. Final result, 1,000 savings and loan organizations failed, along with that, wiping out billions of dollars in deposits, from taxpayers. And then, of course, what happens? Government bailout. Government bailout. Taxpayers foot the bill. Bum, 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 bum. Total cost around $132 billion. That was a lot of money back then. It's a lot of money today. So, big money. Now, fast forward, is that similar to the 2008 Great Recession financial collapse? It's not dissimilar for sure. It's caused by a risky banking practices, bad loans, a housing market crash, subprime mortgages. So here's how it starts. Banks gave out home loans to people who couldn't really afford them. They're called subprime because they are risky. And then the banks took these risky loans and bundled them all together. And I know that you probably know this. We all saw The Big Short, and it took us a little while to make heads and tails on what happened during the Great Recession, but just bear with me. So mortgage-backed securities, these may be a term you haven't heard in a minute, so it's a fun one. Banks put these risky loans together, sold them to other banks and investors as though they were safe. And then through deregulation, banks were allowed to take more risk, less oversight, which leads to reckless lending, risky investments. Housing bubble is created because more people bought homes. They were easy to get loans. No income, no job, called a ninja loan. Housing prices skyrocket. Of course, unsustainable. Eventually, home prices fall. Foreclosures happen. Banks begin to fail. When housing prices drop, people couldn't afford their mortgage payments, which led to foreclosure. Banks lost billions. Then Lehman Brothers goes under. Major bank went bankrupt because of bad mortgage investments, which started the dominoes falling down, panicking the entire financial system, going all over the globe. Stock markets crash, businesses fail, millions of people lose jobs. Government steps in with a government bailout, also known as your money, to prevent a total economic meltdown, one of the worst financial crises in history. So let's follow the money on this stuff. Okay, who is making money on all these things? Because I think that that's a really, really important thing. And I promise I will land this plane. So the motivation for making subprime mortgages was, of course, profit. Banks don't do things other than try and make profit. Okay. So lender profits on fees and interest. So banks and mortgage companies make money by charging fees when originating or issuing a loan and collecting interest. Since subprime loans have higher interest rates, they were especially profitable, at least, of course, while the people were paying their loans. Okay? So there's profit that's made on the origination or selling of a loan. Makes sense? And then there's the selling of the loans, so the securitization. And these lenders, whether or not they were prescient or this is just what they were doing, they didn't hold on to the risky loans for too long. So they realized they were making subprime mortgage loans to people who shouldn't have mortgage loans, and they didn't want to hold on to these. So what that means is they want somebody else to own that and to service the debt. So they package up a bunch of them and sell them to investment banks, which then resold them to investors. So that meant lenders got paid upfront by making the loan, and then they pass the risk on to other people. So it's like hot potato. It's like pulling the pin on a grenade, tossing it, and walking away. Of course, Wall Street likes this because they're also in the business of profit. But, big financial companies wanted more mortgages to bundle and sell as investments, so that created pressure on lenders to approve more loans, even for subprime borrowers who shouldn't be taking on loans in the first place. So obviously, it's a really, really short-term thinking, um, and there's a lot of stuff going on there. So profit, the main driver of all of this, but it's short-term thinking, short-term profit, which is always how it goes. Well, that's not true. That's not always how it goes because they would have kept doing it if they hadn't got their hand caught in the cookie jar, if they hadn't run out of time or runway or whatever the term might be. The walls are closing in. The clock is about to strike midnight. The game's about to end. So I'd like to think that this is simply because of short-term thinking, but I think it's just pure profit thinking and motivation. But fundamentally, people are making money at every stage of this, which is why it's able to be perpetuated. Okay. So again, the loan officer, the mortgage broker made money. The bank or the mortgage lender made money. The investment banker made money. The credit rating agencies. So the people who were supposed to be watching the hen house, who were supposed to be protecting consumers, they were also making money off of this as well. So they got paid for putting a rubber stamp saying that these are high quality investments so that people would feel comfortable buying them. Then, of course, institutional investors bought these things. And then there are insurance carriers who were selling credit default swaps like AIG. They were making money on this as well. So, similar to the savings and loan crisis, and the similarities rather between the savings and loan crisis and the Great Recession, it's deregulation, risky loans and fraud, bursting bubbles, and a pursuit of short-term profits that cause you to turn a blind eye to what are clearly long-term risks. And of course, the person who lost money in the end were regular people, homeowners, foreclosure, ruined credit, investors, people who bought mortgage-backed securities, the economy, so many different people. And of course, the taxpayer because of all these bailouts. So, are there any parallels to what I just went through with the savings and loan, with the Great Recession, and what's going on with the federal government using taxpayer funds to be distributed by USAID to non-governmental organizations, NGOs? Are there any parallels there? And I certainly believe that there are. I believe that there's a lot of them. But fundamentally, let's go back to that original question, is money the root of all evil? Who's making money in all this? Who is making money as the federal government takes in tax revenue from its citizens? It then uses an organization called USAID to distribute money, taxpayer money, to non-governmental organizations with, it appears, little to no oversight or massive oversight, which would then mean fraud and stealing and criminal activity. So, who's making the money? Who is making the money? Well, obviously the recipients, these NGOs, are taking in revenue and making money. These are entities that have staff that are paying salaries and paying bonuses. Then there are the beneficiaries of who is the end user. So if it's whatever, if it's a news organization who's receiving money, if it's a government all across the world who's receiving the money, those are beneficiaries. There's the NGO themselves. And it's alleged, and it really seems that it's also the politicians who are directing USAID to send money to the NGOs who then distribute the money theoretically to interested parties. Interested parties could be, again, just governments all over the world. It could be news organizations here in the country. And it also could be, allegedly, going back into the politician's pocket as well. Could that be true? Could that be true? Well, is there any other way to explain how somebody goes into Washington being a regular human being and then comes out worth $100 million? They just don't earn that much money. You know, you earn $200,000 a year. That's a lot of money, but it's not enough to amass a $100 million net worth. There's just not enough years, not enough payroll cycles in a year to make that happen. Okay. So it's such a basic human system, where things start out well-intentioned enough. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to create these organizations that are going to be able to help people spread democracy or whatever. Then they grow and the organizations grow and more people get involved in this human system. And then what happens? Well, standards start to slip. Accountability disappears if it was ever there in the first place. Small bites start getting taken off of the edges. Little bites here and there. And they realize, oh, nobody's noticing that I'm taking these small bites. Maybe I'll take a bigger bite. Maybe more people come and take smaller bites. And fundamentally, all the money gets stolen. Wah, 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 wah. But just like everything else, there is a beginning and there is an end. There is a beginning to the savings and loan crisis. There was a beginning to the Great Recession, and there was an ending to both of those things as well. Good news for us in the form of government accountability. The end is being proactively implemented and not being forced or thrust upon us. You get that, right? With the savings and loan crisis and the Great Recession, the world just exploded. Stock markets crashed. Everything came to a screeching halt. Slowly at first, then all of a sudden. Well, in this example, there was a new election. A new president got elected, and the president campaigned on doing a lot of the things that they're doing right now. So instead of us reaching the end of our rope, which I think would have happened pretty soon because our deficit and our national debt and everything else extraordinarily high, and big numbers get bigger really, really, really fast. There's a compounding effect there, obviously. So this is a good thing. We should be grateful. My perspective is that we should be grateful that the richest person in the world, probably the smartest person in the world on earth, is giving us his time, attention, and energy to help to expose whatever it is that's going on. Certainly corruption, certainly fraud, probably criminality, all these things. That's the last thing we should be angry about. This is our money that's being extracted from us in the form of taxes, and it's going to places that it ought not. That's a very kind way to put it, and that's not okay. And it's the last thing we should be angry about is somebody doing that. Again, not for any profit motive. But who knows? I don't know what's in Elon Musk's heart. I don't know. All I can see is what's going on right now. And what I see right now is that it's not something that we should be angry about. I'll reserve judgment until everything's done. But when the tide goes out, that's when you see who's not wearing any pants. And here we are. It's interesting that the voices that are yelling the loudest may very well prove to be the guilty parties. But God willing, truth will have its day. And then, God willing, justice will also have its day. It's a friendly reminder there's never going to be anybody more interested in your financial success than you are. So act accordingly.